It's time for the Full Press Hockey Podcast with Jim Biringer and Bruce Zeman.
Shoots! He scores!
And now, with a trip around the National Hockey League, here's Jim and Bruce.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Full Press Hockey Podcast. I'm your host, Jim Biringer, the voice of Full Press Hockey, rocking and rolling alongside my legendary tag team partner, Fox Media NHL analyst, Bruce Zeman. Bruce, welcome back to another episode, buddy.
Jim, thanks for having me on the program again. It's good to talk to you 2 times in one day.
Always 2 times on one day. Thursday, I check it out on WVTK in Vermont, do my weekly NHL segment. Always a blast talking with you, Bruce. And one of the topics, as we hit our Around the NHL segment, one of the topics we were talking about, the Stanley Cup playoffs, about 5 weeks away now. And the playoff races in both the Eastern and Western conferences are getting tight.
Yeah, they absolutely are. And there's a lot of teams that made moves during the trade deadline that are hoping those come to fruition. There are some teams that didn't do anything. We'll see if they get burned. But, you know, as we talked about this morning, there's a couple of teams in each conference that are really primed, you know, to do some damage in the playoffs. And also because of the way it looks, you know, there are some really good teams that are going to wind up going home early.
Yeah, there's going to be really good teams going home early, and I think that's where we need to start. When you start in the Western Conference, let's start specifically at that Central Division. You look atop the standings. You have the Winnipeg Jets, you have the Dallas Stars, and you have the Colorado Avalanche. Now, out of those 3 teams, who doesn't belong, you would say Winnipeg, but, you know, it goes back to the beginning of the season, right? Kevin Cheveldayoff had a tough offseason. We weren't sure what was going on, right? They said, okay, well, we're going to move Pierre-Luc Dubois. Blake Wheeler's not coming back. But they get Gabe Vilardi, they get Rasmus Kupari, they get Iafallo, they get a pick. Connor Hellebuck, Mark Scheifele stay before the season starts. They add Tyler Toffoli, they add Sean Monahan. And there is a belief and a newfound confidence in the Winnipeg Jets. And it's a total buy-in. And now the players want to be there because of the culture change.
Well, they are definitely one of the teams that has changed everything. Last year, around this time when we were talking about the need for an organizational culture change in Winnipeg, maybe getting rid of some players, maybe getting some players to buy in. And you got to give their GM credit because that's exactly what they've done. You know, there's a 3-way tie for first place now in the Central between Winnipeg, Colorado, and Dallas. But I mean, a great move bringing in Tyler Toffoli. He's been everything as advertised, and you're 100% correct. They are poised to do some damage in the Western Conference, and they've got probably the best goaltender in the world, who the New Jersey Devils could have gotten in the offseason, and they didn't. That later. But again, you have one GM that recognizes some needs they need to change, and they do it, as opposed to the New Jersey GM who did not.
Yeah, I mean, look, Winnipeg, you know, you set the tone with Lowry as the captain. There's a belief there. You have guys like Sean Monahan saying to Tyler Toffoli, who they're running buddies going back to junior, they say, hey, you know, this is a place you want to be. This is a good team. Tyler Toffoli, that's his first comments. He's got 4 goals in his first 5 games. He's going to play against New Jersey on Thursday night. He most likely will score a goal or 2 because, you know, that's what happens. And, you know, Connor Hellebuck is the best goalie in the world. And to me, the Winnipeg Jets have their best team since 2018 when they went to the Western Conference Final. I would not be surprised if they can get past the first 2 rounds and they have stuff left in the tank, they get to a Stanley Cup Final this year.
I think you're right. And one of the things that you said this morning on WBTK, which I thought was a really, really great analytics of this situation, you said on the show, which I thought was very, very telling, sometimes the best moves that you make are the moves that you don't make. And there was a ton of pressure on the Jets GM to move Connor Hellebuck, or at least see what you could get for him. They didn't do that. They signed him to an extension. He's bought into it. He has been everything as advertised. And personally, I think that Cheveldayoff has got to be a candidate for the GM of the year.
Yeah, not only do you get Hellebuck to buy in, you get Scheifele to buy in, because look, there were a lot of dominoes with the Winnipeg Jets. If those 2 guys leave, that means Kyle Connor goes because he said he didn't want to be part of a rebuild. You have them buying into what Rick Bowness is going through. They've gone through a lot of adversity. Prayers up to Rick Bowness through what he's going through right now. And, you know, Scott Arniel's there. Laurent Brossoit is a great backup. So Winnipeg has primed themselves, depth down the middle. Everybody's lined up the right way. And they really have 4 lines that can score, good power play. And then you look at Dallas, you look at Colorado atop that division as well. I mean, Colorado, you add Sean Walker, you add Casey Mittelstadt. You know, we've mentioned that trade before. You know, Mittelstadt's worked out well for them. Bo Byram's worked out great for Buffalo. Dallas brings in Chris Tanev, what they needed. You know, Tyler Seguin's return. So those 3 teams, one of those teams are going home in the first round, because if you don't win the division, it's a 2-3 matchup with the other 2. And I thought I thought all 3 teams did well at the trade deadline. Yeah, Dallas may have not done as much as everybody expected them to, but they shored up that defense. Colorado added depth moves, and they got their second line center. Maybe they didn't get the backup goalie that they needed, but maybe they couldn't get it. But I thought all those teams did really, really well at the deadline.
Yeah, they really did. And those playoff series are going to be interesting to see, you know, what parts of the deadline acquisitions, what they're able to do. Because if you look at, you know, that division, you've got Winnipeg, Colorado, and Dallas with 93 points. Nashville's got 84. And then there's really the bottom 4 of, you know, Minnesota, St. Louis, Arizona, and Chicago. But really, you've got 4 very good teams, and you're going to have someone going home early. And then it's going to make for some really, really exciting playoff hockey. But I love playoff time. I don't know any hockey fan that doesn't, but especially when there's so much at stake, especially in the first round.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I mean, look, Nashville's 13-0-2. They're one of those teams that you want to watch and you don't want to play in the playoffs right now because, again, you see Saros, another goaltender the New Jersey Devils could have gotten, is playing well. Philip Forsberg's found his game. Roman Josi should be up for the Norris Trophy this year. Nashville's 13-0-2 in their last 15 games. They cancel U2 trip when they're out in Vegas, so they don't go to the Sphere. It sparked this team. They're playing like it's 2017 again. Depth scoring, Tommy Novak, Luke Evangelista, so many good players, Ryan O'Reilly, Luke Schenn. And look, they're buying into Andrew Burnett's system, and it takes time. Like I've mentioned this before on the podcast. They remind me of the Panthers last year. It took some time for Paul Maurice to get the Panthers to buy in. They've bought in. But don't forget what general manager Barry Trotz did. He brought in character guys for the room. Ryan O'Reilly, Luke Schenn, guys that he believes are good fits for this team. You move out Ryan Johansson, you move out Matt Duchene. Like, yeah, he took some flack for it, but he's brought in the right guys. You bring in Beauvillier, Zucker. You know, they were one of those buyer sellers that they moved out guys that they knew they couldn't keep, but they bring in guys that they knew could help them. Nashville continues to roll. I wouldn't want to play this team in the Stanley Cup playoffs.
No, and you know what? I took some flack the other day amongst some Devils fans because they said that I've been picking on the Devils GM. But let me just reiterate this again. This is a business. It is a results-driven business. Okay, so we talked about Connor Hellebuck. Devils could have gotten him. They didn't. All right. We talked about some of the other players. There's a lot of debate on whether the Devils got enough for Tyler Toffoli. I don't think they did. Again, we'll wait and see how that pans out. But here's another thing that's very, very telling to me. And again, this is not picking on anybody. This is just facts, okay? Who is the coach of the Nashville Predators?
Andrew Burnett.
What bench was he behind recently before this?
New Jersey Devils. Where was he before that? Florida Panthers. He took over for Joel Quenneville, led him to the President's Trophy. The only knock on him was he couldn't adjust in the Stanley Cup playoffs when they played Tampa. Okay, Tampa was on a heater for like 3 straight years in the playoffs. Also, he took over a team that had a lot of controversy behind it with Joel Quenneville going out, but we've seen what he's done behind the bench.
Again, you know, I'm just bringing these up because a lot of these players that are doing, or coaches that are doing really good things at one point were in the New Jersey organization and they're not there anymore.
Yep.
So again, whose job is that to make sure that that stuff is overseen? It's the GM's job.
Exactly. And look, we know we've got into depth about Ruff's contract, the way it was constructed, about how, he had an option and he exercised it because I heard reports that Andrew Burnett was going to be the next head coach of the New Jersey Devils. They had everything ready until Lindy Ruff said, I want to come back because Jack Hughes endorsed him. Well, you know what? Just because the star player endorses the head coach doesn't mean it's the right move. Because now it looks like we're what happened with Lindy Ruff.
But if you're being honest, like, and again, we've mentioned this many times on this podcast, on the show, and we've talked about it on the radio as well. In an organization, the fans, and I get it, you and I are passionate fans of that franchise, but I'm not looking at this now as a fan. I'm looking at this as an analyst, okay? In a results-driven business, what has to happen if people at certain levels are not doing what they need to be doing, the management of that franchise has to step in and say, hey, listen, like personally, again, we don't know what happens in the room. We don't know what went on with Lindy and everything like that. I would not have given them that extension. All right. But now you have a very unhappy fan base. And social media is like a double-edged sword, right?
It is, yeah.
Because there's, I don't know, I actually hate social media because some of the comments on there are just beyond ridiculous. But again, when, anytime the Devils lose and, Hellebuck wins or Toffoli scores a whole bunch of goals, and you're right. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if he had a hat trick.
Right, exactly.
Right. The people are out there, they're saying, we had him on our team and we didn't do anything. Like, I guess I'm just wondering, like, my question would be to, like, the Devils management, if you could ever get them, the owners, like, what are you waiting for? Because here's the other thing. Now, it's all you wrote about it in a great article that you put out about the goaltending situation. Let me tell you something, folks. If you think that Markstrom, Allmark, or UC Soros were expensive at the deadline, wait till you see what they pay in the offseason for these guys.
Exactly.
So the cost isn't going down.
It's only going up, and it always goes up. So look, you see what Nashville's doing. They've pretty much secured their spot in the West, barring some change. You look at the bottom and you see Vegas. Then you mentioned Minnesota, St. Louis. Those are the three teams to me vying for one spot. Like Vegas, they make the move to get Noah Hannafin. You bring in Thomas Hertl. They've been dealing with injuries. Goaltending hasn't been the greatest this year. St. Louis, Minnesota make coaching changes. Minnesota's 8-game point streak got stopped in LA. St. Louis has been up and down, but they're still in the mix. Vegas could still miss this thing, and they make all these moves. But Bill Foley and Kelly McCrimmon, George McPhee have an aggressive attitude that they're going to go out, not just for now, but for the future. And would it surprise me if they make the playoffs? No. It would be a tough 8 for any team like Vancouver or any team that finished first. And Minnesota and St. Louis are right there. And, I don't think too many people expected Minnesota and St. Louis to be playoff teams this year, but you could see what a coaching change does early enough in a season to where they can stay competitive and play meaningful games down the stretch.
Absolutely. And that is where, to get back to what we were talking about a few minutes ago, that is where I think you need to have some hockey people in the ownership group to say, listen, like, what are you doing? And as much as I want to give the guy a shot, I don't think Travis Green is the answer for New Jersey. I see them. I don't like what I see so far. And granted, it's been 7 or 8 games.
Yeah. It's still a small sample size. He's doing some things. That, and we can dive into this a little bit later after we get through the segment, but he's doing some things that Lindy Ruff didn't do. And you can see that it's helping certain players out.
It absolutely is helping certain players out, but he had average success in Vancouver, and it's going to be curious to see what happens. I mean, I'll just throw this out now. Who do you think is the next head coach of the Devils?
Well, I mean, we can go right into this right now because I had a question from Jake from Ontario who sent us a question about, do we think Travis Green's going to be here as the full-time head coach starting next year? My answer is no. I think it could be Craig Berube. I could think it could be, a guy like Gerard Gallant. Could it be, Ricard Gromberg? Could it be somebody else that we're not thinking of, Jay Woodcroft? So I think that's the direction they're going in because let's be honest, I think the whole staff needs to be looked at top to bottom. And I feel bad for a guy like Sergei Gabrielin who just got there. But I don't think Travis Green's going to be the answer moving forward.
Well, based on what some of my sources had told me prior to Lindy Ruff's hiring, the Devils did interview Peter Laviolette and Gallant, and, they went cheap, and it backfired. So I personally think that I think ownership needs to get involved and say to Tom Fitzgerald that you need a proven coach and you need someone to deliver results. I personally think that Tom Fitzgerald should be on the clock now. And we'll see what happens because I find it extremely frustrating the way that the team is playing. It's hard to watch.
It is hard to watch because you think about it, the missed opportunities by the Devils. You've given away 18 points in the standings to bad teams. Yeah, you're still in the mix, but you're really not in the mix because it's in the East. It's come down to Detroit and Washington Washington's starting to fade. I mean, they lost their first game back from a road trip. So that was to be expected to Toronto, who was waiting for them to, even though Toronto had a back-to-back. But still, the Islanders lost ground. They lost 5 straight, picked up 1 point. Pittsburgh's out of it. Buffalo's kind of out of it now. So you have Detroit, you have Washington. Philly is third in the Metro because everybody else behind them can't win games. And New Jersey's inconsistently consistent. One day they look great, one day they don't look great. Look, Jake Allen is finally giving them some stability, but it's too little too late right now in that Eastern Conference playoff race because they just have too much ground to make up and too many teams to pass.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Jake Allen has been lights out in the games that he's played, even the game he lost. You know, I mean, that game could have been a lot worse. He played terrific in the game against, I believe it was Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, he's been really everything that they could have asked for. And, you know, I would ride him if they are. I personally think that it would be bad if this team makes the playoffs this year.
I agree. I think it would be bad because then they're like, oh, well, we did everything right. And, they can justify the mistakes that they made or didn't make and didn't get players that they should have gotten or decisions that they should have made earlier. It still doesn't make – if Jake Allen goes on a run and this team misses the playoffs by a couple of points, and by the way, he's starting his 3rd straight game, which he should be. As he should. It just only justifies the fact and justifies the question why this wasn't done sooner.
Well, again, who does that fall on?
Management. And who else does it fall on? Because we raised the question in the last episode that, hey, what was the message coming from management as to why Jake Allen wasn't traded for sooner? Because he talked about, oh, well, I didn't want to go to another 3-goalie system. I wasn't sure how I was going to get used. Well, wait a minute. Akira Schmid would have gone down to the minors. As we saw with Nico Dawes, he went down to the minors. So it would have been a 2-goalie system anyway. So that doesn't justify you not waiving your no-trade clause. What wasn't said, what was said, who was there, who wasn't there. Again, it does fall on management, and I agree. I think the clock should be ticking on Tom Fitzgerald. Not to say he hasn't done a bad job. It's just decision-making heading into this season where expectations were higher. This team should have taken another step, and we're going backwards.
Yeah, they're not only going backwards. And another thing that is really of concern to me, I was just looking at the standings while you were talking there. New Jersey is only 6 points out of the second wild card spot. And I believe they've got 13 games left or 14 games left. So it's not out of the realm of possibilities by any means. But again, and I'm not a doctor, but I'll tell you what, Jack Hughes certainly looks like he's hurt to me.
Oh, he's definitely hurt. And by the way, yeah, you have 13 games left, but has this team shown any consistent ability to win 4 or 5 games in a row?
Well, here's what I do. I'm going to put on my GM hat and maybe even overrule the coach. If they've decided that they're going to make a run to try to make the playoffs this year, Jake Allen is in net for the rest of those games.
Absolutely, 100%.
I don't have – there's 13 games left. He's a veteran goaltender. He plays all 13 unless, something happens and they're mathematically eliminated. Show the fan base that you're serious. You're trying to win. Kapanen from San Jose, he's played okay, but he's not the answer. He's going to be gone in the offseason. Show the fan base that you're serious about trying to make the playoffs and play Jake Allen because next year, Jake Allen is going to be the backup goaltender to whoever they get in, and you know what? He's still going to get 30 starts. 20
he is
30 starts.
He is, especially the way he's playing like this, and he's a fresh body. He hasn't played a lot in Montreal. Why not? Go ride him until you can't ride him no more, till you're eliminated.
And that does a couple of things. It also shows the player that you believe in him.
All right, exactly. You traded for him. You believe in him. You're going 3rd straight start. He's looked great. You got a tough Winnipeg Jets team coming in. He's going to be tested like he was against Vegas. Again, it comes down to good starts for New Jersey because, yes, while they're still in it, I still think they have a long road to climb because, again, they don't have the talent like a team like Tampa has, who's been here before. Look, they've kind of locked up the first wildcard spot in the Eastern Conference. To get back to that for a minute, you have Point Kucherov. He's put them on their back. Vasilevsky's finally over the back surgery and the recovery, so he's looking good. Defensively, they're a little better with the addition of Dumba. You add Duclair. Yeah, it hurts not to have Sergachev, but John Cooper and the Tampa Bay Lightning are a team you don't want to play come the playoffs because of what they can do and their history. And then again, you have who would you rather have in that second wild card, Detroit or Washington? Nobody thought Washington would be a playoff team this year. And it was out of Detroit, Buffalo, or Ottawa that we're going to make this next leap. And we'll see with Dylan Larkin coming back, that will give the Detroit Red Wings a boost that they need because they had a massive win the other night against Columbus in overtime, which they desperately needed.
Well, I mean, look also what Patty Kane has done for the Red Wings. He's been everything as advertised and more. So you got the way that they're playing suddenly. And one of the teams I wanted to mention in our Around the NHL segment that I've been kind of following that it's kind of come out of nowhere in the last couple of weeks. What about the Buffalo Sabres that everybody had written off for dead? And now they're 5 points out of that second wild card spot. They've really kind of put things together in the last couple of weeks. So, I would not be surprised if they made a little bit of a run also.
Yeah, I mean, look, Buffalo's doing Buffalo things, as I like to say, because when the season doesn't matter, then Buffalo kind of shows up. But look, they're playing meaningful games because the last couple of years, these games were meaningless for them. So they're in the mix, but you always wonder where was this early on in the season for Buffalo? Like Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen's kind of, solidified that number one position. And look, Detroit's got big games. Everybody has big games down the stretch. A winning streak, one way or another, even a losing streak can either put you way out or get you in. And you see it. The Islanders, we said it. They had a 6-game winning streak. Now they have a 5-game losing streak with 1 point because of a loser point. So the Eastern Conference seems to be wild and wacky all the time. Meanwhile, it's like the Western Conference you look at, it's like 3 teams for 1 spot. So that kind of seems more defined, while the East, it feels like it changes minute to minute.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, if you want to take a look for a second at the Eastern Conference as well, I mean, you've got really the 4 teams out of the cream of the crop. You've got the Rangers, the Hurricanes, the Bruins, and Florida. And there's going to be some good playoff series, amongst those four teams. And all those teams now have pretty high expectations, and some made moves at the deadline, some didn't. We'll see what plays out. But my team to watch in the Eastern Conference is the Florida Panthers.
Yeah, I mean, look, Florida, you add Vladdy Tarasenko, you add Kyle Pozo. Those were great moves. As I said on WVTK, I thought Carolina finally getting off their horse, their hill about we don't trade for rentals. They get Jake Getzel. You bring in Evgeny Kuznetsov. That's a different team now because it's just not Aho, Svechnikov, Marty Necas. Now you have to worry about Kuznetsov, Getzel. Getzel's look great in a Carolina Hurricanes uniform. So the Canes are a team to watch. Look, the Rangers are playing well, but they're getting injuries. The injury bug again. It all comes down to matchup, and can Shesterkin do it? Because to be honest, the way Tampa's playing, if they match up with the New York Rangers, I'm not sure the Rangers get out of the first round in that matchup.
The Tampa Bay Lightning are definitely not a team I want to play in the first round. Just because of their pedigree, their leadership. Steven Stamkos has been through hell and back, and he just always seems to come through in the clutch. But, I mean, again, unlike what the team you and I root for has done, the Rangers have built themselves into a powerhouse. They made a bunch of moves. They're 45-20-4. They're top of the Metropolitan Conference. And, they're a team that has got some pretty high expectations. And we'll see what, Peter Laviolette is able to do with that group. I mean, they've got, they're really, if you think about it, even though they've had a good year, they're a team that needs to go a few rounds in the postseason this year.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, considering the disappointing loss last year in the first round where they were up 2-0, everybody thought they'd get past New Jersey and make a deeper run. They didn't. Then that's a team that has to make a deep run, justify everything that they've done. Then you look at, you say to yourself, okay, well, what's Philly going to do? They're kind of like kicking around. They're still there, but are they, they'll probably get in because teams behind them just can't win. And then you go to the Atlantic, Boston up there, top the division, even without a number one center. They're playing well with Olmark and Swayman between the pipes. Their defense is playing well. Florida is right there too. And then Toronto's locked in the third spot right now. They're going to have to go on the road to either Boston or Florida, and it's going to be a tough matchup for them because there's always expectations on that team.
And again, Toronto is another one that has got such a bevy of questions. If they have a terrific postseason run, will the questions about breaking up their top four, will those go away? If John Tavares has a killer postseason, does he stick around? They're another team. So there's a couple of teams in there that even though you wouldn't think that there's a ton of pressure on them,
there's pressure.
Well, there's not only pressure, but there's also pressure because of past failures.
Yes, especially Toronto, because they haven't done anything. They have one playoff series win since 2004. This team was expected to be in a Stanley Cup final by now and win a Stanley Cup, and they can't even get past the first round half the time because they can't. They run into Tampa, Boston. They lost last year in the second round. They didn't even show up. There's expectations for this team, but though listening to the general manager speak this week, Brad Treliving said something interesting. He's like, look, the last couple of years coming out All-Star break around trade deadline, this team was really locked into who they were going to play. They were way up on teams. This year was a little different because they were fighting Tampa and they were fighting a couple of teams and they were in and out of that wild card spot, 5-6 points. And now they've taken off. So that adversity that they've gone through might help them in the first round and into the playoffs.
Well, out of all those teams, I think that the most pressure, you might think this is crazy, but I think the team that has the most pressure in the Eastern Conference is probably the Bruins. And
I agree.
We talked about this morning on WVTK. I'll put on your ownership hat for a second there, Jim. If you're the Boston Bruins ownership, what do you do if they have another cataclysmic collapse in the playoffs?
I would have to analyze everything first, looking at what happened at the trade deadline, the assets that this team has given up. They didn't really give up much. They got Andrew Peeke from Columbus because they couldn't do much, and Don Sweeney, was hesitant to make moves. They didn't have the assets, the cap space. Now the summer comes. You have to pay Swayman. You have to get a number one center. One of your goalies is going. So there's already changes with the roster as it is. There's going to be pressure on Jim Montgomery, and there will be pressure on Don Sweeney. Now, if they blow a 3-1 lead to a team, whoever they play, say it's Detroit, that's a problem. If they lose in 7 games, it's a close series, you let the group come back. But you're going to say, hey, we're watching this closely, and you better add these needs. So it's a difficult decision because we know the Bruins eventually will take a step back, we think, but they're always there. But what kind of message does it send to say we're going to just change everything when it comes down to the players playing?
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I guess what I'm saying is I think everybody, just like we expected some teams, i.e. New Jersey, I had New Jersey playing against Edmonton in the Stanley Cup final this year. Edmonton may very well get there because everything they've done since the coaching change has worked. But on the other hand, this is a results-driven business, and I would be concerned if they don't make it past the first round this year. I mean, you don't know who they're going to play yet, but last year was an epic collapse. It was an epic collapse, and this is all for naught if Marchand scores with 3 seconds left against Bobrovsky. So, and again, you have to keep that in mind. I mean, there's bad bounces, but the thing is that's the way.
Too many, but if you look from Game 5 on, and I don't want to keep playing revisionist history, but you look from Game 5 on, they had leads, they blew them every time, especially in Game 7. All you had to do is get the puck out down the ice. That doesn't go to overtime, you don't lose. But also, you started to let Matthew Tkachuk take over that series in Game 4 to let your goalie get pushed around, and you kind of were getting into his antics when for the first three-quarter games, You just let him do his stupid stuff, and you weren't getting involved. And then the end of game 4, you do, and then it's like the series flipped on your head. So I think that's something the Bruins have to stay away from whoever they face. Now, they're not going to play Florida in the first round. But if it's Tampa, if it's Detroit, you're going to see who they're going to face. Now, again, that's all depending on if they finish first. If they don't, then they have Toronto. And that's usually a favorable matchup for them. So they like to push the Maple Leafs around. Jake DeBrusk usually steps up. So it's going to be interesting to see what the Bruins do this year because there's pressure on that team for sure.
So how far do the Bruins need to make it in the playoffs? Do you consider it to be a successful season for them?
I mean, I think nothing. I mean, you could say Eastern Conference Final, but I think they want to get back to it. I think they have sights set on Stanley Cup.
Yeah.
Because of what happened last year.
Yeah. Do you have any who are your thoughts? If you had to pick one team right now, what team comes out of the Eastern Conference?
Florida. I just think they're too deep. They're too deep right now. I think look, you could say Carolina, Florida, Eastern Conference Final again, pick one of those two teams to come out of the East because the way they're both teams are built. But I think Florida has something to prove. I think Bobrovsky's playing well. You have depth down the middle. You add Tarasenko, Carolina, like we've said, with the moves that they made. But again, anything can happen once you get to the Stanley Cup playoffs. We've seen it.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's true. And as for the Western Conference, I have Edmonton coming out of the Western Conference. You have somebody different?
I think Winnipeg can come out. I know I sound like I'm on this Winnipeg train all of a sudden, but like I just believe what they've built there, and I like what they've done. Look, I like the moves Edmonton made at the deadline. Don't get me wrong. I thought Edmonton had a great deadline, but you're gonna face LA again. You might face Vancouver or Vegas, whoever you play. Then you got a tough Winnipeg Jets team. So, or whoever's coming out of that Central Division. So, I mean, can they get there? Sure. But again, can the depth scoring step up? Can their defense play well? Goaltending for Edmonton, it's always been the key for them come playoff time.
Well, let me just throw this out there. So if the season ended today,
right,
in the first round, the Bruins would be playing Detroit. The Panthers would be taking on the Flyers. The Rangers would be taking on the Tampa Bay Lightning, which is not a good matchup for them. And then Carolina and Toronto. And
no. It would be Carolina and Philly, and then Florida and Toronto.
All right, I'm sorry, I got that screwed up.
Yeah.
But then in the Western Conference, I mean, again, the top 4 teams: Vancouver, Winnipeg, Colorado, Dallas. I mean, whew, that's going to be one heck of a playoff series. A bunch of playoff series is out there.
Yeah, I mean, look, like I said, we said off the top, whoever doesn't finish first in the Central, good luck playing whoever you're playing in the 2-3 matchup. And then it looks like we're going to have Edmonton and LA again in the playoffs for like the 3rd year in a row. And then dating back to their history in the Smythe division, they've always seemed to play. And it seems like Edmonton always comes out on the winning end of that. Maybe it'll be different this year for LA, but you never know with them if they can get the goaltending, because they can play Edmonton really well in the playoffs for like 3 games and then everything like disappears after that. So it's going to be interesting to see that. And what's also going to be interesting is these wildcard teams, who they get in. So, I mean, again, East is wild and wacky, minute-to-minute changes. The West, kind of more defined, but a team you don't want to play is Nashville, in my opinion.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, the one team that I completely agree with you that I would not want to play is Winnipeg.
Yeah. I love Winnipeg right now. I'm going to get a firsthand look at it Thursday night. I mean, I saw what they did in highlights against the Rangers. If Hellebuck's on, look out. That team is very, very tough to play against. So
Toffoli is a terrific addition for them.
It is. One more thing before we wrap up everything. Let's head back to the New Jersey Devils for a minute, just to close everything out, kind of tie everything up in a bow. We talk about goaltenders, like. And you say to yourself, you look at the teams that are playing well and are in the playoffs, and they have a number 1 goalie. There's no platoon outside of Boston, but it feels like Swayman's the guy there. Who would you go after? What order would you have between Markstrom, Saros, and Ullmark?
One of the things that I would look at, first of all, is, and this is kind of a long-winded answer, I'll make this as short as I can. I think you'd have to, first of all, I would want to see which players really want to be there. Okay. Again, we don't know what happens in the room and everything. A lot of rumors that Ullmark didn't want to go anywhere come the trade deadline. And listen, whether it's family reasons or whatever, you can't blame a guy for that. But again, if I'm the Devils GM and I'm like, you can come here to New Jersey and be the undisputed number one goalie, all right? Again, it is a business, and there's a lot of other factors, but it is a business above anything else. And if you want to do this for the 8 or 10 years, you're going to do it, make all this money, you have to realize that that's part of this.
Right.
And so to me, that would kind of sour me a little bit on Ullmark. Also, he did not have a great playoff series last year. Markstrom wanted to come to New Jersey, and whatever reason that fell apart, whether it's the salary or retention or whatever. So in order, I would be Markstrom, Saros, Ullmark, and actually number 4 on my list, I don't think this would ever happen, but would be Sergei Bobrovsky.
Yeah, I mean, I could see. Yeah, I mean, again, if Spencer Knight could eventually come to the NHL and take over that position in Florida because he is the guy of their future. But yeah, I think Bobrovsky or Dylan Merzlikins or I don't know about Gibson anymore. But to me, I think as much as I love Markstrom, if you could get Saros and then extend him on a reasonable salary because he's younger, you know what he can do. I mean, look, that would be a good play for them. I think Markstrom, Saros are 1-2 for this team, and you know that's what they're going after this summer.
Well, and again, like nothing against John Gibson, but I think that this team with Nico and Jack Hughes and some of the other players coming into their prime, you need to go to one of these guys and say, you're the number one for the next. And again, when it comes to the contracts, you're first of all, you're going to pay. You're going to pay, and you're going to give up something unless they're a UFA or they can work something else out. But you may have to give them an extra year or two to get them to come here. But again, if I'm a player and they're going to say, and one other thing, let me add on to answer your question. Another thing that I think is critical in this, because I think this is one of the most important decisions in the franchise's history.
Yeah,
really do, because they have not had a really solid, lights out goaltender since Marty left. Nothing against Corey Schneider, but his years were kind of wasted with mediocre teams.
I agree with that.
So this is a very important decision, and I would absolutely, maybe he already is, I would absolutely have Martin Brodeur in on this decision as to who is going to be the face of the franchise, because again, for folks that haven't been inside the Prudential Center, which is a great place to see a game, if you walk in there with Marty and you say, you know what, Jacob or UC or John or whoever, you see up there, your number could be up there in the rafters.
Yep.
A bunch of championships if you come here, and it's going to cost money, it's going to cost resources, but you have to do it. You absolutely have to do it, because it's glaring.
Yeah, it is. It's very glaring. It's a position of need for a long time. They didn't do it in the offseason. They need to do it now. It's going to be interesting what the New Jersey Devils do come the offseason. Again, they're still in this playoff race, but again, to me, it's down to 2 teams. I'm barring some miracle run by the New Jersey Devils. And the Western Conference race is going to be fun too. But Bruce, thank you again for doing the Full Press Hockey Podcast.
Good to be here, Jim. We'll talk again next week.
Yes, we will. This has been the Full Press Hockey Podcast. I'm your host, Jim Biringer, alongside my legendary tag team partner, Vox Media NHL analyst, Bruce Zeman. Get this iTunes, Spotify, also up on YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Take care, everybody. Talk again real soon.
Barry Trotz, Nashville Predators, making sure you're listening to Full Press Hockey Podcast.